Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Aaron, how are you, man? This is really kind of the last show of the year that you and I are doing together, kind of the big wrap-up show, man. But how's your holidays going so far?
It's been going well. It's been good to be home with the family and got family coming into town and really looking forward to that. And then potentially, we are getting out of town, going skiing. And that's where I said that potentially comes in. Unfortunately, where we're going, Park City, it's the worst skiing in 147 years. And it's the year I picked to go. So there you go. So I'm going to go go ski in mud and hit rocks with my rental skis and all that for a couple of days, but it's fine.
Well, you get to go see some mountains.
How about you, man?
Oh, it's good. It's good. Yeah, we had some family in town, and I am happy that we've all reached it. We're actually recording this on December 23rd. I think people will probably listen to it in a week or so, but we've made it past the winter equinox, so we're going to start getting a few more days or a few more minutes of sunshine every day, which is nice. God, this it's dark when you wake up and dark when you go, you get home from work kind of stuff sort of sucks. So I'm glad we're past that. So yeah, ready for the holidays, ready for the break. We are getting folks some shows out to listen to if you are going to travel like Aaron. So, but yeah, this will be, we will do shows more or less up till the end. We're going to take a little bit of a break in January. We'll kind of explain that as we get there, but be a few less shows in January and then kind of back at it full bore, Wednesdays and Sundays back in February. So, well, listen, man, this one we have done. We did sort of cloud year in cloud. We did the year in AI. We're going to do some predictions, and we're going to talk a little bit about some big issues that we think we need to review. But more than likely, we're really kind of highlighting some things that'll probably be ongoing stuff to get into for all of 2026. Where do you want to dive in? You want to just dive in with sort of the big issues first, kind of give some things to think about, and then predictions, or you want to jump right into predictions? All right. Go back and forth.
Yeah, let's go back and forth. I was going to say, maybe let's just go back and forth. Okay. I feel like if we hold the predictions to the end, we're going to bore everyone to death.
We're only going to get the diehards who listen past however long they listen for. Well, first thing I had on my list of sort of big issues that I think, again, these are sort of looking forward to 2026, but we've talked about this before. I think OpenAI's revenues and ultimately their areas of focus. What are they focusing on? Is it doubling down on growing ChatGPT? Is it ads? Is it partnerships? Is it shopping? Is it hardware? Is it I think ultimately those are going to be top of mind discussions for the year. It looks like they're closing out the year roughly. Again, this is this is going to be the joys of until they go public. Everything is going to be sort of speculative numbers. They sort of finished the year speculatively about $13 billion in terms of revenue, somewhere in the 800 million. I think they say weekly active users is the way they do it. I can't remember if it was monthly active users or weekly active users, but decent number of people at least signed up for accounts, 800 million. And then the last number I saw that was relevant to them, and I'll have to find a link to it in the show notes. There were some numbers that were kind of, and again, this is always where you're not totally sure if it's like leaked or if it's real or if it's kind of smokescreen. But they did sort of some numbers were released that said their margins on inference have been growing over the last couple of quarters. So essentially, they are getting more efficient in terms of their cost of delivering inference, meaning cost of delivering ChatGPT responses over the last couple of quarters. So that would indicate that they are becoming a less wasteful or more profitable, however you want to look at it, company going into it. But I think, I think their number will be an interesting number to speculate. But I think more importantly, where are they focusing their resources? Because if it's like they laid out for 2025, it's going to be a lot of different places, and it's going to be hard to get all those things right.
Yeah. And while we're talking about that, first of all, completely agree with everything you're saying. Why don't we wrap some of the predictions into that? And so I'm going to I think there's two predictions that really kind of wrap straight into this. The first one being people will question whether Sam Altman is the right person to lead OpenAI.
Yeah.
I think this is one of those things that it's the classic. You have different CEO types, and it's like the CEO that gets you to that first million, or maybe that first 10 million or whatever, and then you've got the different CEOs that, and I think everyone will say Sam Altman is pretty exceptional at what he does. He is of like the Zucks or the Steve Jobs or some of these others of the world, right? Like he's arguably in those circles, but at the same time, every single one of them had some kind of transition along the path where it was like, hey, I don't know if they're the guy. And so I just think this is a natural part of all of this, as you start to see cracks in the foundation, or they get spread too thin, or they start to do really, really well. Honestly, there's no scenario in which I feel like this prediction is kind of a lock.
Well, the reason I put this one on there was, I mean, historically, Sam has been a deal maker, right? I mean, he kind of made his name at Y Combinator, and that was all about funding things. He is an extremely good storyteller. He's an extremely good fundraiser. But he's also said, look, my background and my comfort level is not in being an operator. And we know from covering literally hundreds of acquisitions and talking to hundreds of startups, the difference between the person who is great at building the first product is a different skill set than the person who is great at running a company, meaning like, building a sales force and understanding go-to-market and pricing. And, and sometimes there are people that have multiple of those skills. Sometimes there are people who hire the right people to augment their skills. I think they're, like I said in that first thing, I think their biggest thing is, yes, raising money will still be a gigantic thing for OpenAI for the foreseeable future. But then the question becomes, is it equally as valuable or more important to be, what are we going to focus on? Right. Because like Steve Jobs was sort of famous for saying, like, the best thing that we do at Apple is say no, which is, again, it's a prioritization skill. Right now, it doesn't feel like Sam has that necessarily. And again, not saying he's not good at certain things that he does. It's just a question of like, does OpenAI need somebody who's going to be, great at the product side going forward? So I think that's going to be an open question. But I've heard it a number of times, and even just his comments of like, here's what I'm good at, here's what I don't necessarily get excitement about. Especially as they're talking about IPO, does feel like the kind of conversation that comes up.
No, and your comparison to Steve Jobs, I think, is perfect because, is he both Steve Jobs and Tim Cook? No. Right. Like, and why was Tim Cook brought in? Well, he was absolutely that, operations person and scale person and efficiency person. But he wasn't the visionary to kind of set up that direction. Right. And we're starting to see that now with, Apple Intelligence and AI over at Apple. And now they're, everyone's starting to question, well, is Tim Cook the right guy to lead them in an AI era? Right. So you're almost seeing like that pendulum swing back.
Right.
So I think that's a very good analogy, actually.
Where do you want to go next?
Well, actually, I was going to wrap another prediction in here real quick. I was going to also say, I think it was your prediction, at least one big AI IPO in 2026, and it won't go well. First of all, I'm going to say I don't think it's OpenAI. Like, I don't think they won't IPO until they have to. They're just going to keep raising crazy money and crazy circular money as long as they can. But I feel like it's Anthropic. Anthropic seems to be talking about it, seems to be maybe leaking things. Maybe things are just leaking out. It could be them. But if it's not them, I don't know who else it would be. But to your point of it won't go well, I don't think it's going to go well.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that people are already talking about is, all of these companies have taken, tons and tons of funding. Again, it's, relative, but, tons, more than we've ever seen for most IPOs. And they've done so many rounds of sort of private funding that, you kind of question, okay, so, it comes out, they're all going to be, none of them, we know just from the numbers that they tell us and the forecast that they made, none of them are going to come out positive, cash flow positive. None of them are profitable at this point, which is fine. We've seen plenty of companies that aren't profitable come out. I think that the real, when I had put down and it won't go well, I don't mean the company won't do well in the future. I just mean there is going to be so much pressure for all of the people that are holding internal shares, holding, early non-pre-IPO shares, to be like, I want to get out. I want to get my hundreds, my millions, my tens of millions, my billions right now. I just feel like there's going to be so much downward pressure that no matter how excited they can create, how much, frothiness they can create on Wall Street, there's going to be so much, as long as people, aren't locked up in it. And a lot of these companies have been around for, more than 3 or 4 years. So there are people who have, vesting schedules. That to me feels like that's going to be, there's going to be so much counter pressure to being like, oh, okay, there's a chance to get my money out of here, as opposed to I'm not worried about how it runs itself quarter to quarter. So it's not a statement so much of the companies won't do well. I just don't think the IPO, when people look back on it, after 3 months or 6 months, are going to be like, oh, that was a rocket ship, like we've seen with others. So
well, and a lot of times when they do those IPOs, we've seen it, many times before. It's almost standard procedure now. Is anybody internal, you're locked up for 60 to 90 days after the IPO anyway.
Right.
And so it's almost like, well, if it's going to IPO, wait. If you're going to buy it, wait 60 to 90 days, because it's probably going to dip once everyone unlocks internally.
Yeah. Well, and it'll be interesting to see. I mean, we'll start learning a lot about all these investors. Are they hung up with the 60 to 90 day lockup, or is it just the employees? And because they may want to try and get out of it as well. I mean, we've already seen a few companies try and get out of some of these things. Okay. Next thing I had that I think is going to be sort of big issue to review in 2026. And again, this will be one of those ones that we're going to have to figure out ways to track things. But I think the second big thing beyond OpenAI's revenue is not NVIDIA's revenues, but NVIDIA's customer profitability. Right. So, they've sold all these GPUs to people, in some cases in circular fashion, other cases, just, people are growing and doing their thing. How profitable are those companies? Because again, what that ultimately would be proving or disproving is when you are building, if you're building on NVIDIA GPUs, you are building with the idea that we are okay with building on the leading edge technology of, everything's based on leading edge technology. It's got certain characteristics built into it, but you are paying a very high premium for those sort of things. And is your business even more profitable at that level than you could be if you were making trade-offs with, lower cost technology, or, technology that failed more often or had lower cost per watt or something like that. And I think, that is the thing that, I come back to, when the .com bubble crashed, it was the infrastructure companies were doing great. The Ciscos and the Suns and they were all doing great. But once their customers stopped being able to be profitable, having made all these acquisitions and investments they had made, then that's when things sort of fell apart. And so I think it'll be interesting to watch what happens there, and then probably just as much, what does NVIDIA do to kind of mitigate that? Because I think they probably know, and we see this from some of the things, whether it's CoreWeave or some of those kind of companies, like they're struggling to be quickly profitable. It doesn't mean they won't be profitable long term, but they're struggling to be quickly profitable. There's just so much, upfront investment that has to be, amortized and depreciated and all this sort of stuff. NVIDIA does have the advantage of being like, I got a lot of money that I can throw around to sort of keep the system where I want it to be. It'll be interesting to watch what they do to find an equilibrium in the market that allows them to be successful and at least keep their customers solvent for longer than maybe they would have been originally.
Yeah. And actually, while you were talking about that, I just thought of this too. I wonder if too, over time, NVIDIA doesn't almost become follow the Intel model eventually. And what I mean by that is that Intel's very well known behind the scenes, that, if you work at a vendor, It's famously Intel MDF, right? Like you can get some Intel money to slap an Intel sticker on stuff to encourage Intel GPUs or CPUs. Like, are we going to reach that point with NVIDIA where it's going to be like NVIDIA inside and all of these other kinds of things where NVIDIA's like, because they do it, I'm sure. But never to the level probably that Intel has historically, where it was like just so well known in the industry that Intel was just funding everyone behind the scenes with MDF. Is that going to happen for NVIDIA eventually?
I got to imagine it will. It doesn't. It makes logical sense. It was always such a small percentage of their revenue, and they had such huge margins. I think it's the when you have the power of the market has given you tremendous value. If you don't take advantage of that beyond just, kind of saying, oh, my employees have, valuable stock or somebody has valuable stock, you are giving up a superpower that doesn't last very long. So yeah, as long as their stock is somewhere in the $5 trillion range, like they have what feels like unlimited options to go, make plays in the market that help them keep their moat where it is in all sorts of ways: marketing, software, hardware, partnerships, all sorts of stuff. What do you have predictions wise? What do you want to jump on next for predictions wise?
Yeah, well, I think this is kind of sort of related, and it just is the next on our list, but it will be, AI being a central issue in 2026 elections here in the United States. And it could be job losses, it could be electricity prices, but the NVIDIA customer profitability made me think of this, of like the recent thing of like, hey, we're going to open up NVIDIA chips to China, but like, you just got to kick the US government, 25% or whatever there it was. Like it basically was, and that's pretty polarizing here of some folks are like, hey, that's capitalism. And other folks are be like, that's not capitalism. That's just straight up, the government taking a cut and so I feel like things like this don't help. Public perception, right?
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because that's if you were to just talk about like electricity prices, like, hey, they want to put a data center in your city, your electricity prices go up, or like those feel like the kind of issues that are relatable to people that impact elections. But where do corporations get involved when it's like, hey, wait, the AI companies are getting the bump and we're not getting the bump, and does that sort of, like you said, the haves and have-nots rally people as well? I think that's another good element of it that will probably be an issue whether or not people totally understand it or not. Because if they're not, if for example the quote unquote tariffs are supposed to help, it's like, okay, well, how did that help me? Right? Are they able to turn that into something that people can relate to? So, I think that'll be interesting. I think the other part, you had this as one of your predictions, major, LPU, TPU, dedicated inference chip. So alternative hardware accelerator to an NVIDIA makes a breakthrough in 2026. I think, I think this one will be very interesting to watch because as of right now, I guess you could say there's like Groq, Groq with a Q is out there. AMD sort of hints around at this. We obviously know Google's TPUs are starting to take off, but I think that's, is there the hardware breakthrough that really changes the economics of AI? I think this year we saw it with software, right? We saw it with DeepSeek and so forth. Will we see it with hardware will be a huge thing to track in 2026.
Yeah, agreed. And I'll just add this. I mean, I had to do a bunch of research on this recently. So, I mean, you've got Groq, you've got Cerebras Networks, you've got Samanova. Those are the three probably biggest ones, I would say, from a, startup-y standpoint. And then, of course, you've got AWS with their chips and you've got Google with their chips. And so there's five major players. And, we've talked about this many, many times on the podcast. And then, of course, NVIDIA, don't get me wrong, they're just assumed to be in there. So there's six major players right there. Everything eventually boils down to a category king and one or two others. And so I think, if nothing else, the 2026 could be the year, and we're going to talk about this more in our predictions and where we're going with everything. But I think 2026 is going to be about efficiency. And this whole concept of efficiency, whether it provides NVIDIA pressure or whether it like bumps up like a Sambanova or a Groq because that, you know, that's their whole thing is dedicated inference at a more economical cost. I think that's going to be a big thing.
Yeah.
Going forward.
No, I agree. I agree.
And we're going to have consolidation and we're going to have winners and losers.
Yeah, no, I think the economics, that feels like the last couple of years have been all about, announcements about something big, right? Giant models, giant data centers, giant, funding rounds, giant teams of scientists moving to one company with consolidation. I feel like we are due for a year of level of accountability. And you talked about it. I think we've got a number of things in the list here, but whether it's, accountability of, just the economics of delivering chatbots or the economics or the accountability of chipsets or a lot of different things, I think are going to be people coming to some realizations of like, hey, we spent a lot. Did we get out of it what we wanted to get out of it? So, and that actually leads into the next thing I had on the list. Do we start to see and hear more and more enterprise success stories, company success stories, not just, number of people using ChatGPT, beyond the sort of immediate easy button, which was, I give Microsoft a bunch of money and they give me CoPilot seats of various forms, or I give Google a bunch of money and they give me a bunch of Gemini seats, right? Which, have had some layers of success, but we've also seen reports out of Microsoft saying, hey, people aren't using it enough. People aren't getting enough efficiency out of it. We're already seeing both of them, go from being like, oh, it's kind of free to like, oh, here we're throwing pricing increases at you because of stuff. But I will be very interested to sort of see the first rounds of enterprise things that aren't just like, hey, I'm the CEO. I can check the box from my board and say, hey, we rolled out 40,000 seats of AI. So give me a gold star for that. Let the market, position us as being, somehow ahead in our industry. But I think we're going to start seeing or not seeing stories come out, going like, but how is the enterprise using it for stuff beyond just, enabling your knowledge workers?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to actually, I got a theory on this. I'm going to throw it back at you for your feedback.
Yep.
Will we reach a point in 2026 where CoPilot or Gemini, I'll talk about that specifically, but you could, anyone, like Adobe or Salesforce or anybody else who's kind of baking AI in, is it truly a product? And is it truly a product worth charging for? Or is it just a feature? Like AI is just a feature in their existing products and product sets. And have we truly even seen AI as a product yet? And so like what I'm thinking in my head is there is enterprise success, but I think there's enterprise success that is beyond this, but I think it's honestly products. And I feel like CoPilot and Gemini will devolve into features, if I'm being honest. I mean, I know that's a pretty extreme opinion on this, but
well, I mean, I think you're right to an extent. Like it's always been very hard to people always sort of would build something as, quote unquote, cloud native, or it would be sort of, added on to something that you already knew. I think in the case of any of those things right now, they're all sort of attachments to some bundle that you have, right? They're attachments to Office 365, or they're attachments to like, the Google Office suite. And yes, there is a standalone Gemini and there's a standalone, kind of CoPilot type of thing. I think you're right. I think they sort of blend in the background as sort of features. I think the problem is they can't give them away for free, right? Like somewhere in the accounting for things, it's like, I could add, and I'm going to get these numbers wrong. These are just kind of a thing, but like somebody at Microsoft or somebody at Google could go, hey, look, if we added 100 million new users of, like Teams or, Google, whatever, like how much, could we do a lot of that for free in order, marginally for free or marginal cost for free in order to be able to like grow stickiness for other stuff? They'd be like, yeah, our infrastructure is built such that the marginal cost to add those next couple 100 million, users isn't a big deal. That doesn't work for AI, right? And it probably doesn't work for for several years until they get to a point where they're not, deficient on hardware GPUs. They're not deficient on data center space, power, cooling, all those sort of things. So, I mean, I think what they're going to have to hope is that people see value in them and they start to just live with the fact that it's like, yeah, I'm paying $30 per head per month more than I was before, but like I just have to live with the trade-off of it, right? Because I don't think people are going to want to like give up on it. I don't think people are going to want to get into a constant cycle of being like, every year I'm going to renegotiate with Microsoft if I like it or if I don't like it, or which people get to keep their seat license or don't. Like that feels like a complete pain in the ass. But I think the Microsofts and the Googles of the world have to hope that for the next 2 or 3 years, probably that people just kind of eat those costs while they build out, they do their build out to a point where they can get the, the actual delivery cost of it down. Because it's, it's probably not terribly profitable at this point for delivering like white collar worker services. It's still probably profitable for delivering ads, but not for white collar, collaboration.
No, agreed.
Services.
And I almost see this like in to kind of like to let folks visualize what I'm thinking is like today, like, yeah, you would pay for Gemini or you pay for CoPilot. Like I almost see this like your typical, hey, you go to the product site, you go for pricing and there's your small, medium, large sizes. I mean, because everyone always does offerings in threes. And then you've got here's what's in the small, here's what's in the medium, and here's what's in the large. And it's going to be like, oh, you want AI? Well, that's going to be here's the X in the large. If you want AI, you need the large plan. You don't get AI in the medium plan. Like, I feel like at some point it's not even going to be like, hey, it's a $30 add-on. It's just going to be baked into small, medium, large plans. And it's either you have AI or you don't have AI, and they'll just charge you $30 more there.
Yeah. And I mean, look, it all goes back to the old statement of like, everything is either bundling or unbundling. Like every product, everything is bundling. And so, yes, they will go through some things. If you buy the medium plan, you may not get everything. If you buy large, you do. And then the next question will be, oh, well, what happens when the, Sora / Nano Banana thing comes out? Does that get automatically bundled in? Because those are the ones where people are going to be like, I don't want 40,000 seats of making movies or making videos if I've got financial analysts, but like that one you might need to do as an independent thing until you can get it to a price where it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, so no, I think you're right. I did do a long podcast about that. I think I called it the 515 or 51085 kind of breakdown of stuff. And there are a lot of people who fit in that 10% category. They just gave Microsoft and Google a bunch of money and, check, we're AI ready.
Yep.
Okay. The other thing we have in this, and I think you and I both agree on it, I just don't know that we'll get the timing right of it, is, we both sort of agree that there are going to be hundreds of applications within any given organization, just like we have with SaaS today, but whatever, that people will want to bring AI to, that they'll realize like, I do want to do that, but I need some better controls to bring my data to it. And I don't need to bring it to a trillion parameter model. Like I don't need, 100 years of soccer scores or how to write a Shakespearean sonnet. I just need a model small enough, fast enough, and trainable enough that I can go have it work on this specific thing. So I do think we will see, and I think you predict this as well, like more and more usage of those smaller models. I think the real interesting thing will be, can you, like, how much easier than it is today will it be to train, adjust, adapt them to a set of data that you need to make it smart in the way that you want to make it smart?
Yeah. And I'll kind of throw the full disclaimer in this, because this is, comes dangerously close to overlapping with my day job. So full disclaimer, this is opinion of Aaron. Yep. But I will say this, like, this entire thesis is literally why I changed jobs. Of like, okay, I'm kind of going all in on this prediction in the fact that in my day job, I'm now, going and working for a company that, is in the business of dedicated purpose-built models, right? And the whole idea of enterprise and efficiency and security and privacy. So, like, I feel pretty strongly, of course, like, hey, one direction the industry is going to go in is the Gemini and the OpenAIs of the world of like it's a prosumer consumer kind of model.
Yeah.
But I think there's going to be an entire industry that still is largely untapped that is enterprise models. And I'll just say right-sized models. I won't even necessarily big or small. It's like completely depends.
And it ultimately boils down to, your job aside and all that stuff. It ultimately boils down to it would be very interesting and sort of unique if AI comes along in the enterprise and completely upends every single kind of pattern and way of doing things that the enterprise has in the past, right? So like, like the idea that like all of the enterprises will pick one of two models, breaks every enterprise buying pattern we've ever seen. And every, vendor, like it's, yes, lots of them use, for example, SAP to do their ERP system. But, if you were to talk to the consultants around SAP, it's like, yeah, no two of them look the same, right? So there will be some fundamental technologies that will be the same, and there will be, 4 or 5 sort of leading things or whatever. But it would be very interesting. And again, this is where we go back to being like the economics of AI don't look anything like the economics of anything we've ever seen in computing before. So maybe everything does get turned on its head. But those two things are very much at contrast with each other. Of the economics sort of right now lend themselves to centralization, even though it's not profitable, and the buying patterns have never lent themselves to pure centralization. Like there's always 2 or 3 or 4 choices, and then they all get super customized. And right now, that's not at all what this stuff looks like. So it's gonna be interesting to see how those two opposing forces shake themselves out in 2026.
Nope, it's a good way to put it. It's perfect.
Let's see what else we got on our list. I think with some of these we've talked about, some of them we've kind of gone through. I think there's going to be a lot more conversations in 2026 about something that a lot of us have taken for granted because we don't really live in this world, but it just sort of gets done, and that's data center buildouts, right? I mean, we've watched AWS grow up and Azure grow up and Google grow up, and talk about how fantastic their data centers are. There's been some talk of like, hey, we need to expand some capacity, but like they've been pretty good at doing it. And they augment that with working with the Equinixes of the world and lots of other colos of the world. But it does feel like right now the numbers that are being thrown around and probably more importantly, the time frames that are being thrown around for the necessary data center build out, those sort of the maths don't math as well. And so it's going to be very interesting to see, what breakthroughs come along in terms of data center build outs, or what government regulatory changes, pass or don't pass to allow certain things to happen. Do we start to see new regions of the world become the data center hubs that, maybe they weren't before or something like that. So I think that whole space is going to be one that everybody's going to kind of want to pay attention to, whether it's really part of anything that you care about, or you're just sort of like, I need to know if I'm going to commit to somebody who ultimately like can't build out their data centers fast enough, and hence I'll constantly be on their throttle list. And so maybe that's going to be a concern to me about performance or price or something like that.
Yeah. And here's the thing. So, having worked at Equinix for a little over a year, one big thing I learned is it's about 2 years start to finish from idea to lights on in a data center serving bits. Mm-hmm. And so, and that's from a very mature company that knows what they're doing and opening, data centers all over the world. And so like when the OpenAIs and all these others, like I get it, you can go hire certain smart people and you can do this. But at the end of the day, like if it's your first time doing it, and the first time doing it's like a megawatt data center or multi megawatt data center, shit's hard, man. Like shit is really hard. Yeah. And so, it's power rights, it's connectivity, like it's all these different things. And I can almost see, I'll even take it a step further and say, I can see a world in which you have data centers popping up in different areas of the world for different reasons. Like you could take for instance, let's say you want an AI factory, meaning like you use the NVIDIA term of like it's just there to build a bunch of models. It doesn't necessarily need a lot of connectivity once you get the data in, and then you build the model and you got to get the data out. You can kind of put those anywhere there's decent power because you don't necessarily need super high connectivity. But if you're doing, inferencing and you're supporting, I don't know, trading on Wall Street or stock exchanges or the other, man, you got to be close to the source and you got to have super fast connectivity. And so, I see data centers being almost like a fast data center and another data center almost being like a powerful data center, because the whole idea of like the places where you have a lot of power and high connectivity don't overlap anymore. They've already been built on.
Yeah.
Like that market is mature. Like that market is really mature. Right. And oh, by the way, it's at capacity, and the major metros already have.
And that's why I brought up. That's why I brought up. Like it's going to be, unfortunately, as important to sort of follow, regulatory policy, and do they allow new nuclear power plants to be built, right. Or even just like how is
undersea data centers,
even just like how are municipalities, prioritizing, consumer electricity versus these data centers or water or, all sorts of stuff. So I think, that whole space, I think, is going to be sort of fascinating to watch, regardless of sort of which side of the aisle you're on, or even just, consumer versus operator, I think is going to be very interesting to get smart about that space. So
quick aside on that. I just listened to a podcast the other day and it was about data centers in space. And it was like this whole like, hey, we're going to put data centers in space. And it was like, oh, because, like if you need a bunch of power, you can turn it towards the sun and get the solar, and it's out of the atmosphere, and you get all the good bits of the sun for energy. And if you need to cool it, you can kind of turn it and make it cool. And I'm just like, my head immediately went to, as too many years in data center operations. I'm like, yeah, but who's going to fricking plug in the network cable when it's bad? Like, like, you know what I mean? I get it. Like in theory, that sounds really, really awesome. I'm like, man, whatever.
Well, it's not even that. It's just like, oh, cool. Like all these GPUs died. How are you going to get somebody up there to, so
you got an astronaut on standby to fucking unplug the cable and, replace the GPU.
That's going to be you and I have both done those jobs in terrestrial things. It will be interesting to me what that guy has to deal with. All right, what else do we have on here that are big things? I think the other thing that I think will become more and more of an interesting topic, and I wrote it down as very open ended, but just simply in 2026, like what is agentic AI? Like what is an AI agent? What does that actually mean? What do we expect from those things? What are the leading tool sets to build them? What are best practices for doing them? I feel like people have, there are lots of people who, whenever a problem arises about something having to do with AI, they just go, well, when we get to agentic AI, and then they kind of hand wavy do things. And I feel like there are a dozen 101 level questions that, people can't answer today of like, what is an agent? What does that mean? Like what, who owns it? Who can actually build it? What is it capable of doing? That I think we're going to have to spend a lot of time digging into, because I feel like, people talk all the time about like, well, just a bunch of agents will do all these things. And as of right now, like that, there isn't a simple reality to most of those predictions at this point. And I think it's going to be interesting to dig into it and just sort of see where it really is, find actual examples of it, find where the complete bullshit stuff is out there, and everywhere in between. So I've got that as a big, 2026 thing of just figuring it out, period.
Yeah. Without going straight into a prediction about that, but kind of pulling in some of our predictions that are around that. First of all, I completely agree. And here's why. I think the problem everyone is kind of seeing with agentic AI is they're treating agentic AI like they did. It's like, oh, it's just Gen AI, but it does stuff. Mm-hmm. Meaning like I could have one big model and it's trained on all, it's multi-purpose, but it's also kind of general purpose all at the same time. Well, what we're starting to already see with agentic AI, the reason why agentic AI is already starting to go through a bit of a trough of disillusionment is because we're trying to get general purpose, smaller models to do very, very specific tasks. And so for me, like I think the industry, so let me step back 1 second. Like when people, when companies release models, a lot of times there's three kinds of models, and this is kind of under the covers a little bit. Like there's the base model, which is exactly what it sounds like, the base. And then more and more we're seeing reasoning. Reasoning came into being in the last year, and we're starting to see reasoning, and we can talk about reasoning in a second. But then there's something called the instruct model. And the instruct model it's a base model that's been instructed to do one specific task, agentic AI, coding, Gen AI and text generation. I think we're going to start to see a split from these base models and these reasoning models into very, very instruct agentic specific models.
Yeah.
In 2026, like I just see 2026, if nothing else, is the big models in the sky will always have a use, but for the things to get really reliable results, I think you're going to need specialized models.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then, that will open up its own can of worms of like, cool, like we have a bunch of specialized models to do these things. How do I life cycle those? How do I, who updates them? How frequently should they be updated? And all those sort of things that people go like, oh, wait, those are all problems that we have in software. We have those problems with applications. We have those with infrastructure. And I think
you're like, oh, you're using 1.2 of the agentic agent. You need version 1.3. Like it's going to be,
do I have to update the application, or can I just update the model under the covers? And is it still compatible? And all those fun problems that, as much as everybody likes to talk about it, getting rid of all these jobs, it's like somebody's going to still have to do all that stuff. Now, how they do it, we'll have to dig into that stuff. But
if anything, it's more complex than ever.
That's right. And yeah, exactly. It's it's like when Kubernetes first came out, and I was just talking to infrastructure people, and I was like, okay, let me put this in perspective for you. When VMware would come out, which you all know and love, that would come out with a new version every 18 months, and then most of you would upgrade it every 3 years. And then the open source community got involved, and OpenStack came along, and that came out every 6 months. And if you didn't upgrade it within the first 6 months or whatever, you missed the release. And then Kubernetes came along, and it was doing it every 3 months, and it had a 2-cycle thing, and people were freaking out, and they were like, "Well, I want all the good stuff, but I don't want all the speed. I don't want all the retesting. I don't want all the validation." Well, look how fast models come out, and kind of think about what's that. You can think about like, well, I wish they wouldn't do that, but at the same time, you are going to wish they did that because you're like, well, I want it to be smarter. I want it to be better. This is where people are going to have to build the infrastructure or subscribe to, the systems that deal with life cycle as much as they deal with anything else. So,
yep. Agreed.
Interesting stuff. All right. How are we doing on time here? Let's make sure we're not killing people. We are at 42 minutes. Maybe we hit on a couple of more things in the prediction space, and then we can kind of wrap up and get out of here.
Yep. Sounds good. So I'll kind of throw some of those out here, and you can kind of tell me what you think of them. So let's see. I put one down there. We kind of already talked about it a little bit, but I mean, maybe if you just want to have a final comment on it, Gemini will dominate the consumer-prosumer space, and OpenAI will go through trough of disillusionment. Just so everyone knows, there's a running joke behind this. This is going to be my new running prediction every year, because my other prediction, Azure will be the number one cloud. I put it in again. I think how many years now in a row have I put this one in? So I'm going to say Gemini is going to be the new, consumer-prosumer one as well. So now I have 2 running ones every year, no matter what.
All right. Now,
so what's your thoughts?
I think this one's going to be interesting, because I think if this will be an interesting race to watch, because if Gemini gets bigger than ChatGPT before OpenAI gets to IPO, that's going to be a pretty interesting moment, right? Like, right now everybody is like, all right, if OpenAI goes IPO, they will be the leaders at that time, blah, blah. It's going to be interesting to see how fast Google can figure out how to leverage the rest of their, multi-billion user, properties, whether it's YouTube or whether it's Android or whether it's whatever. I think it's a fantastically interesting thing, because it ultimately will determine if integration is more important, if one of the large companies wins, does a startup kind of disrupt the AI space. But yeah, it's a bold choice. I mean, you've never gotten your Azure part of it right, but hey, it's
I'm willing to swing for the fences. Yeah, I'm willing to swing for the fences every year, and it's okay.
There you go.
I like doing these. This is fun.
Nice.
So what else we got? What else you got? Pick another one that we haven't covered yet.
What else do we have on here? You've got that. We talked about that one. I think the last one we had in here, and I'll let you. I'll read it and I'll let you kind of explain it. AWS and Azure will double down on being a solutions provider instead of primitive supplier for AI and infrastructure. So in essence, the two of those companies in particular, Google to a certain extent, but they have been very much primitives, right? We have 200 services, and you think you're going to see either or both of them doubling down to become more integrated, as we get into the AI space. I think it's an interesting prediction, because I think right now we are really in a transition from the cloud went so many years of being primitives, and then somebody on top of it, did the integration because they built a SaaS service that you could go consume. Microsoft's done a little better. They do have some touchable, usable types of applications. This would be a complete 180 for AWS. So it'll be a very interesting thing if they could pull off. But it does feel like, the demand right now for AI is, I want stuff that just works right now, not 6 months, 12 months from when we start the project. So it's the demand is there, the market interest is there, because we are still really early stage. So it'll be interesting to see. Yeah. It's a bold prediction, especially from AWS. It's a bold prediction.
No, and my theory behind this too is, like, again, it goes back to the Gemini and OpenAI stuff we were talking about earlier. I think the whole theory of, like, hey, what got you here won't get you there, of like, okay, what got AWS and Azure to where they are now was building primitives.
Yeah.
But I think in an AI world, I think it is the Gemini and OpenAI model of it's more providing solutions, and it's providing, so whether it's direct to consumer, whether it's prosumer, whether it's in certain verticals, AI for healthcare or AI for manufacturing. I think, what's going to end up happening is AWS and Azure at some point, I'm never going to say, hey, the growth has stopped, because that's silly. But I am going to say, like, the way in which Gemini and OpenAI have grown in recent years, at some point, AWS and Azure, they're all smart folks over there. They're going to have to go, hey, this primitive thing got us so far. I think this other model is proving to be the more accelerated business model in an AR world. That was my theory behind it.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting, because the other side of that is, in order to do that, you very much likely have to, probably build it on top of your own model. And we know where AWS is in terms of owning their own model. The perception is still that, like, Nova is probably behind somewhat. They probably have areas where they're strong, but generally behind the other couple, 3 or 4 leaders. And Microsoft and Azure, it's well, how closely tied do you want to build your future to the OpenAI or GPT-5 model, knowing that OpenAI is actively trying to sort of disenfranchise that relationship as quickly as they can. So, it's. I think those are probably huge structural conversations they're having internally, and then the how do you actually get to it would be fascinating to sort of, because oh, by the way, in order to be able to pull that off for either one of them, you got to change the engine out while the plane's flying, because you're now both nearly $100 billion or more than $100 billion businesses that can't go down while you're making these changes. So they are the old guard in the old Andy Jassy vernacular, trying to make these sort of changes, which is hard.
So I'm going to throw one at you in real time. This is not in our notes in any way, shape, or form, but you made me think of this.
Love it.
So Audible. Here we go. Here's an Audible. Where does Meta and Llama fit into any of this? Because you notice, like, so those that can't see us, we didn't mention Meta or Llama one time in any of our notes, and it's just because, hey, hey, at the end of it, we kind of focus on the enterprise, and they're not necessarily enterprise AI. They don't even have an enterprise AI product. But I bring them up in the context of they have a model, and they have, they were, at least for a while there, were out literally just buying up the industry. And then I would say with very mixed results. And you don't hear much about them. Like, you literally don't hear much about them, and you don't hear much about the future of them. I don't know anybody going, oh yeah, Meta's making a comeback, or, oh, that llama model's awesome. Like, and maybe to tie those together, does AWS or Azure, I mean, they're already partnering with Anthropic, but I mean, do you see a scenario in which Meta has a play in this at all? Like, what's your thoughts? I don't have an opinion. I just thought of it while you were saying that.
I think looking back on it, and again, this is the pace at which the AI stuff changes so much. Is, every time you and I have done one of these AI shows, the last couple of weeks, we've been doing these sort of year-end wrap-ups. We finish, we turn off the recording, and we go, oh man, we forgot 3 or 4 things. Like, I can't believe we totally forgot these. And if we think about 2025, like, 2024, the llama model gets released, and Mike and Meta at the time says, like, hey, we are, we're committed to making this open source. And even though it wasn't exactly the open source that like the Linux community expects, it was like, hey, we're committed to this. And they were putting stuff out there. They were putting the llama stack out there. So they were, kind of building upon stuff that they had shown how to make it work. And here's how you're going to build agents. And it was like, oh wow, this is weird, because people inherently don't have to interact with Meta other than, directly through their apps. And, as a whole, people don't necessarily trust the team behind Meta, but, whatever. So they went from being very visible, and then, Llama 4 was sort of, didn't hit necessarily. Mark goes out, hires a bunch of people. There's some, as expected, turmoil, because it's hard to hire an all-star team of people. I think the thing is, I think Llama or Meta, the company behind Llama, whatever they eventually end up becoming called, because it's going to also be weird that they're going to be called Meta, and they're essentially giving up on the metaverse. Right? They just announced that because it's costing them, $50 billion a year or something like that, which could be going to other stuff. So the Mark Zuckerberg company, whatever they're called in 2026 and beyond, I think they're going to be sort of unique in that, they've been well known to push their technologies to drive things that are good for them, right? So they were very much about, pushing open source for hardware and data center design. And they've been helpful to the community in a lot of things in terms of pushing certain languages. And, so they've had a give and take relationship with things. It hasn't necessarily been the enterprise. I don't necessarily think Llama and Llama Stack were necessarily like done specifically for the enterprise. But I think they're going to have a weird relationship in that, do they have to be the best at what they do? I think as long as they are the best at advertising around, collaboration, then they probably think they're doing a good job, and they they probably will be for their shareholders and so forth. I think they're just in such a weird position of like, what is people's relationship with those companies? It's really not. I mean, it's sort of Facebook, but it's probably now it's more like it's Instagram, it's Signal, it's some of that stuff. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think they will sort out. I think that the advantage they have, and we've seen this with every single one of these companies that is big, they have the advantage of a giant money printing machine that allows them to make mistakes and then readjust and make mistakes and readjust. And they've all proven time and time again that they figure it out, right? They figure out a way to get good people to work for them. They figure out a way to leverage their strength, their technical capabilities. I think they will figure it out. I just don't know that, in 2026, we'd have to talk about them a lot. Not that, we have a bias against them, but it's like, if we didn't talk about the Llama 5 model, all that much, other than, hey, it came out and it, it's really good on the baseline, the various baselines. And it's behind the scenes of like Instagram and Meta AI and Meta Ray-Ban glasses, you'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Like I fully expect AI to be an integrated part of the Mark Zuckerberg companies. And I don't necessarily think that knowing which model they use, how they use it, whether it continues to be as open source as it is, or it's not, or like, I don't know that matters as much as people thought 2 or 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I think as long as because I think more than anything, their goal is going to be, how do I build a seamless end user experience that gets both the connectedness between other people or whatever, and the AI behind the scenes doing interesting stuff that maybe the other companies don't necessarily have to deal with, right? Like, for example, and again, I'm rambling. I'm going to shut up here in a second.
No,
I'm going to go too long.
I actually have a follow-up question for you. I got it.
I'll put it this way. Like, let's put it this way. So if you are OpenAI, you've figured out that there is a market of 800 million weekly people that like to type stuff into, like, the user interface is text, right? And at the same time, I don't know how many people are on Instagram, but I got to imagine it's probably of the same size or something, that love pictures and videos of, short form types of things. And they love, some connections with the people that they know and some that they don't know. But and if you're like, hey, behind those two experiences, you're going to put AI, like, those are probably two very, very different, like, design characteristics and decisions you make and so on and so forth, that don't necessarily have to compete with each other, right? They're just sort of competing with, like, create something that I guess in essence, you're competing of people's, like, infinite or non-infinite time. But yeah, I think, I don't think people will care as much that, whether Llama is where it is in the stack ranking or whatever, as long as people are like, yeah, Instagram is still worth 2 hours of my day or whatever, whatever it is.
Sure. So, well, a quick follow-up for you, because I'm just super interested in your thoughts on this. So twofold question. Do you ever see Meta doing the whole Google Alphabet thing of, like, I'm going to put myself in two so I can kind of put my money over here and my research over here? So that's one question.
Yeah, sure.
And second question is, do you ever think there's a scenario in which, because today, like, don't get me wrong, like, when I talk about AWS and Azure, like, you can get llamas, because again, in the primitives, right?
Yeah,
like, you can get them in there, but do you think there's ever like it's the AWS model powered by Llama? Do you ever think, like, does Meta give a shit enough to ever go do something like that, or do they're like, hey, look, as long as it's built in our products and it's doing our thing, that's all we care about?
Yeah, I have to imagine that somewhere in their world, right? Because there's a certain amount of what they do that is, driven by Meta, and there's probably a certain amount of what they do that's driven by an open ecosystem that can access their tools and their APIs and so forth. So yeah, it's in their best interest to probably have something. No, well, number one, to have a world-class data science team, and some of those people in the data science community care that their stuff gets made visible to the public in ways that data scientists like to, right? Whether it's publishing papers or publishing things in the open source, and then I think there's always going to be, there's probably always going to be the Llama model that you never see, that nobody ever sees, that has 25% better stuff still in there to make Instagram great, or to make serving ads great, or whatever it is. And I don't know that they need to necessarily go as far as the Google thing happened because Google literally was like, I have so much money and I need a way to keep recruiting people to come work at Google. And to a certain extent, like, Google's ambitions back at the time when they split the company up were almost feel a little bit like the way that OpenAI talks about their ambitions right now. Except the difference is, Google had multiple wildly profitable companies at the time, and they were like, okay, we're going to get into cars and hot air balloons and space and all this other kind of crazy stuff. But they were like, it's because I'm printing so much money, and I realize that if I hire the smartest people in the world and I'll keep them under the roof of Google, like, that's an advantage. But they could afford to do those sort of things. Meta can kind of afford to do that, but I don't know that they necessarily want to signal it in that same way. I think there's probably ways they can do it behind the scenes that draw less regulatory attention to themselves and all sorts of other things. But yeah, I would fully expect that they're going to have an aspect of what they do that's out in the open and helpful that for other people. And, because that engenders people to be like, oh, I can work with them. I can work with them for whatever reasons. And then they're going to have stuff that they just won't give away. But I don't know that. I think I think there's a certain interesting relationship that goes on between Apple and Google, where Apple's like, okay, we're going to put Meta behind, we're going to put Gemini behind the scenes. And I think they have a certain kind of relationship, and they understand each other, and they understand, where the other one would go and won't go, that I don't know that any of them trust Meta in the same way. I don't know that they have a business relationship with anybody. At least they haven't proven that necessarily with anybody. So yeah, I'd be surprised if AWS is like, oh well, we're gonna have to replace Nova with the fancy, I think they would go, let's just spend the money on Anthropic, and that way we can control it, and we, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I think it's ultimately all these guys have the same problem, which is like, what, do I truly understand my moat, and do I truly understand if X, Y, and Z actions happen, what happens to my moat? And I think in a lot of cases, their moats are kind of the same. There's only a few of them in which, and again, this is where the Apple, like Google relationship, I think is probably a little bit unique, to where they go, our moats aren't that overlapping as much as people think they are, and therefore we can work together. Whereas I think for a lot of them, it's like, nope, our moats would become the same, and we can't have that. These guys are all big enough, they want to control the entire vertical stack. And it's interesting. Those would be fascinating, masters of the universe meetings to be in to see how the
without a doubt, for sure.
So, all right, cool. Man. Well, listen, just to give people an audience, God damn, we just went an hour. Holy crap. We don't usually do that. We are not Joe Rogan. So just real quick, by the time you hear this, this will probably be the last Wednesday show of the year. I'll do one last Sunday perspective, I think, if I remember the calendar right. And then the shows in January will be a little bit different. They will still be in your feed. You will not have to do anything different. They'll be a little different. And then we'll do some explaining as we get into those shows where things are going to change a little bit come February. So, but for anybody listening, you don't have to do anything different. Thank you for listening. Hope you're having a great year. Hope you're having a great holiday season, spending time with family, staying healthy, and looking forward to 2026. So, Aaron, any last thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I just want to say for everyone out there, thanks for sticking with us. And actually, this prediction show actually tends to be one of our best listened to shows of the year. So thanks for sticking with us, even though it does tend to be one of our longer shows, without a doubt.
That's right. So thanks, everybody. Great to have you with the Cloudcast community, and we look forward to 2026 with you.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.